In the heart of a forgotten valley, surrounded by forests that breathed secrets and rivers that remembered blood, there stood the kingdom of Varellion. Its stone walls had turned the color of ashes, its banners faded beneath endless rain. The kingdom's ruler, King Aldric the Silent, was a man of wisdom and of sorrow. He had once been a great knight, famed for ending wars with words instead of blades. But a single betrayal had stolen his voice from him, not by spell or wound, but by grief. For when his beloved Queen Elara was murdered in the Tower of Saints, the king swore never to speak again until her killer was revealed. And so, for 12 long years, Varellion was ruled by silence. The court learned to read his thoughts through his eyes. His commands were written in ink black as crow feathers, carried by his pale scribe across the castle's echoing halls. Some said the king had gone mad. Others said his silence gave him power that his words, once released, could curse an entire bloodline. But the truth lay somewhere between the two, locked behind the ancient steel doors of his grief. In the absence of the queen, the castle grew colder. Servants whispered that her spirit roamed the tower each midnight, her weeping mixed with the creak of the weathered stones. One storm-torn night, a traveler arrived, draped in a cloak of violet velvet, his boots heavy with mud from distant lands. He claimed to be a historian from the south, seeking the truth behind the queen's death for his chronicles. But his eyes told another story, one of vengeance. His name was Ser Calen, and unknown to all, he was the bastard son of a knight executed by Aldric's father decades ago. Calen had come not to write history, but to rewrite it with blood. He soon earned the trust of the court with his honeyed speech. The nobles loved stories, and Calen knew how to weave them, of old wars, of fallen saints, of treasures buried beneath cathedrals. He spent nights in the royal library, studying the chronicles of Elara's reign. In the parchment's dust, he found whispers of forbidden alliances and of a secret meeting the night she died. There, hidden in the folds of time, lay a truth darker than any spell. The queen had not been murdered by an assassin, but by someone within the crown itself. Meanwhile, King Aldric sat alone by the hearth, the crown upon his knee, staring into the fire. Every flicker reminded him of her laughter, her scent of lavender, the way she touched his hand before the council. His silence had become his punishment and his prayer. He knew his people suffered, crops failed, roads decayed, and armies whispered rebellion. Yet he remained unmoved, chained by his vow. Until her killer is unmasked, his final spoken words had been, "My tongue shall rest beside her grave." The land began to rot. Winter came early, and the snow did not melt. Farmers hung black cloth on their doors, pleading for mercy from gods that no longer listened. The castle chapel filled with candles for the dead children, soldiers, lovers, all victims of hunger and despair. Still, the king spoke not a word. Some begged him to break his vow, to bless the harvest, to pray aloud. But Aldric's silence had grown sacred. To shatter it would mean betraying Elara's memory. Then, one morning, Ser Calen requested audience with the king. In his hand, he carried a sealed letter, its seal broken by time, its ink faded. He bowed before the silent monarch and placed it on the throne's step. "My lord," he said softly, "this letter was written by your queen, on the night she died." The court gasped. Aldric's hand trembled as he reached for it. The parchment smelled faintly of lilac. The writing, though faded, was hers beyond doubt. It read, "To the one I love, should this reach you after I am gone, know that the walls have ears, and those who claim loyalty hide daggers in their smiles. If I fall, do not trust the blood that sits nearest your throne." The king's heart thundered. Only one man of royal blood shared his line, the prince, his younger brother, Lord Maeron. And in that moment, Aldric's silence cracked, not with words, but with tears. He dismissed the court and sat alone for hours, the letter trembling between his fingers, as though afraid to speak the truth it held. That night, Aldric climbed the Tower of Saints where Elara had died. Each step moaned beneath his boots, each gust of wind carried her name. In the chamber at the top, moonlight spilled across the floor like spilled silver. There, among the dust, he saw a shadow waiting, his brother. Maeron turned, sword already drawn, his face pale and proud. "You should have burned that letter," he whispered. "She was going to expose us all." The king said nothing. His silence was more terrible than any battle cry. The brothers fought beneath the gaze of the moon. No words, only steel and breath. Maeron cursed him, called him coward, king of ghosts, but Aldric did not reply. At last, the king drove his blade through Maeron's heart, and in that moment, the vow was broken. His first word in 12 years was her name, Elara. The echo filled the tower and drifted down through the valley like a ghost set free. But in breaking his silence, Aldric doomed himself. The curse of his grief demanded payment. By dawn, the king was dead. They found him seated beside her old crown, his hand still clutching her letter. His eyes were open, but his lips, those lips that had known only silence for years, were curved in peace. The kingdom mourned, not with trumpets or feasts, but with quiet tears. For in his silence, the king had taught them something no sermon could, that love, once betrayed, speaks louder than any war. The historians of Varellion would later write that the king's ghost still walks the tower, silent as ever, guarding her crown. And every 100 years, when the moonlight strikes the stones just right, you can hear a single whisper from the heights. Elara. They say it brings both sorrow and blessing, sorrow for those who betrayed love, and blessing for those who kept it pure. And thus, the legend of the silent crown was born, etched not in ink or stone, but in silence itself. A century had passed since the death of King Aldric the Silent, yet the kingdom of Varellion remained suspended in time. Its towers had grown brittle, ivy crawling across stone walls like veins of forgotten memory. Winter lingered year-round, and the valley below whispered with the sighs of those long dead. Travelers rarely dared approach. The few who did reported a cold so unnatural it seemed to draw the warmth from their bones. Among them, one courageous scholar ventured forth, Serenya Vale, drawn by tales of a silent king whose love and grief had transcended death itself. Serenya, a learned woman in her late 20s, approached the castle alone, her cloak dusted with snow. Her father had recounted Varellion in stories, cautioning her that some truths were too heavy for mortal ears. Yet she, driven by insatiable curiosity, sought to uncover the secrets buried in those haunted stones. Every step toward the castle felt like stepping into a dream painted with shadows and frost. The drawbridge sagged with age, ropes frayed like the nerves of the earth itself, yet she crossed, each creak a warning she chose to ignore. Inside, the halls were silent beyond comprehension. Dust covered the floors, cobwebs draped over chandeliers, and broken windows admitted shafts of cold moonlight that danced like spirits. The throne of Aldric the Silent still stood at the center, silver tarnished to grey, draped in centuries of neglect. Upon it lay the silent crown, faintly shimmering, as if it remembered the king who had worn it. Beside it, a single white feather, undisturbed, floated like a memory of something lost forever. Serenya made camp in the royal library, a cathedral of old knowledge where time had nearly stopped. Scrolls crumbled to touch, and ink had faded to sepia, yet one diary remained intact, its seal cracked but its words preserved, Confession of Maeron, brother to the king. The scholar broke the wax seal with trembling fingers, unaware that she was about to invite the crown's own legacy into her life. The diary contained warnings of betrayal, curses, and the truth of Elara's death, but more insidiously, it contained the echo of grief, potent enough to whisper into a living soul. Night fell swiftly. The wind rattled the broken windows, and the castle seemed to exhale around her. As Serenya read, shadows moved where none should have been. Candle flames flickered, dancing in strange patterns that mirrored the letters of the diary. Then, faintly, a figure appeared, a woman clothed in white, hair like spun gold, eyes like morning stars. It was Queen Elara, her ghost returning to protect her story. She spoke without words, her presence filling the room with sorrow, her fragrance of lilac drifting in the cold air. The crown pulsed with light as the queen drew near, and the diary's ink shifted, forming symbols Serenya did not know she had written. Each stroke felt alive, and each phrase seemed to hum with memory. Elara's ghost gestured to the crown, then to Serenya, as if instructing her to take up a task that had long waited for a living hand. Fear and fascination warred in the historian's chest. She understood at once. The crown had absorbed centuries of silence, grief, and truth, and now it demanded recognition. Serenya slept fitfully that night, dreaming of the king and queen, of betrayal and the final duel atop the Tower of Saints. She saw Aldric's blade pierce his brother's heart, heard the silent cry of the Queen, and felt the weight of 12 years of silence pressing against her chest. When she awoke, her quill moved on its own, recording visions she could not speak aloud. Every word she wrote carried the echo of grief, as if the crown itself sought to ensure that history would remember its pain. Over the following days, she explored the castle. In the throne hall, she traced her hands along the dust-covered banners, imagining the colors they once bore, black and silver, symbols of a dynasty now lost. The castle seemed to respond to her presence. Wind moaned through broken windows as if whispering secrets, while the shadows of past courtiers danced on walls invisible to the eye. She found the remains of the king's scribe, still clutching black-feathered quills, the ink dried in jagged lines of unspoken commands. On the 7th night, a storm descended on the castle. Lightning split the spire of the tower, thunder shaking the stones. Serenya climbed the spiral staircase to the top, the Tower of Saints where so much tragedy had occurred. There, beneath the moon's silver gaze, she saw Maeron's lingering shadow, not fully dead, a spectre of jealousy and treachery. He spoke in whispers, accusing the silent king, accusing her, accusing the very walls that held their stories. Her voice failed to respond. The crown demanded her silence in return for the knowledge she sought. The next morning, Serenya found that her journal had changed. Blank pages now shimmered faintly under sunlight, as if awaiting the next words to be written by a hand not entirely her own. Outside, the valley seemed alive with unseen eyes. She understood then that the curse was not merely death or punishment, it was memory embodied, a legacy of grief, demanding respect and caution. She realized she had become part of a continuum, one link in the chain that began with Aldric and Elara. Time blurred in the castle. Days and nights became indistinguishable. Serenya saw visions of long-lost soldiers, of peasants huddled in snow, of children who had never known warmth. She heard whispers of Aldric calling Elara's name, repeated endlessly through the corridors. Every creak of wood, every flicker of candle, felt like the echo of a moment in the past, pressing against her consciousness. She felt the crown's power, not as gold or jewel, but as the weight of truth and sorrow, a force that demanded guardianship. Eventually, she dared to speak to the ghost. "What must I do?" she asked, her voice trembling. Elara's figure glimmered, luminous yet fragile. Her lips did not move, yet Serenya understood perfectly. She must preserve the story without speaking it aloud. She must document, remember, and guard it from those who would twist history. Only in silence could the crown's lessons survive. Weeks turned to months. Serenya became one with the castle, her body and mind attuned to its rhythms. She felt the presence of Aldric beside her, watching her, approving in ways only silence could convey. The crown occasionally floated, pulsing with soft golden light, a heartbeat of memory echoing in the empty hall. The ghosts of past courtiers whispered through the corridors, sometimes angry, sometimes sorrowful, but always distant, reminding her that she walked among echoes. In a hidden chamber beneath the royal library, Serenya Vale kneels among Aldric and Elara's untouched treasures, silver goblets, embroidered tapestries, and the queen's harp. The silent crown hovers above, pulsing golden white light that stretches shadows across stone walls. A small locket lies open in her hands, containing locks of the king and queen's hair, glimmering faintly as if acknowledging her. Lavender mist swirls through the chamber, blending with moonlit fog and candlelight to create a timeless, sacred atmosphere. Serenya's hands shook as she continued her work. She discovered letters, some unsent, some hidden beneath floorboards, chronicling forbidden love, betrayal, and whispered regrets. Each page added layers to her understanding: Maeron's ambition, Aldric's silence, Elara's foresight. The crown absorbed her readings, integrating her knowledge into its centuries-long memory. She realized that the artifact was not merely cursed, it was a living archive, a sentinel preserving truth across generations. Winter deepened. The castle groaned under its weight, but Serenya remained. She walked nightly through the halls, speaking aloud to no one, recording events, visions, and whispers in her journal. She began to see faint outlines of past kings and queens walking beside her, their expressions unreadable. Sometimes Aldric's eyes met hers in reflective surfaces, mirrors, puddles, polished armor, and she felt a wordless connection, a silent approval. By the 10th month, she sensed her own life merging with the castle. Her reflection in the mirrors sometimes showed a ghostly figure rather than her living self. She understood that the crown's power demanded guardians who would eventually be absorbed into its history. She could leave, yet the valley would remain, waiting for the next soul drawn by curiosity. Silence had claimed her partially, yet in that silence, she had discovered purpose. On the final night of her stay, a fierce storm struck. Thunder shattered the remaining spire, lightning illuminating the valley in brief flashes. The crown floated, bathed in ethereal light, and Serenya felt her voice leave her entirely, a final surrender to the artifact's will. She no longer needed speech. The crown and ghosts communicated their truths directly to her mind. She accepted her fate, knowing she had become a permanent part of the legend, a bridge between past and future. When spring arrived, travelers discovered the castle once more. They found the crown resting on the throne, radiant yet solemn, and the body of Serenya seated before it, quill in hand, eyes open and unblinking. Her journal lay filled with pages of empty, glowing symbols, readable only to those who could hear the echoes of history. They buried her at the base of the tower, marking her grave simply. She listened, and became the story. And so the legend endured. The silent crown, never merely a relic of gold, remained a sentinel of grief, love, and truth. Whispered stories told that on moonlit nights, one could hear two voices in the empty valley, a man calling Elara, and a woman answering, I forgive you. Silence had become immortal. And in that silence, the kingdom of Varellion still lived, not in stone, not in banners, but in memory, forever echoing the lessons of the heart, loss, and the eternal weight of truth.